Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. Ambassador Chaz Freeman will be with us in just a moment on 2 years later, and Israel is nearing collapse. But first this. My friends, if you care about your liberty and your right to control your own future, you need to hear about this. From October 10th to 12th, Mikkel Thorpe, host of the Expat Money Show, is bringing together top experts from around the world for the Expat Money Online Summit, and it's completely free to attend. You'll learn how to legally protect your wealth, secure second residences and citizenships, reduce your tax burden, and own property abroad, all to safeguard your freedom. This year's focus is on Latin America, where opportunity is booming. Argentina is shifting to free markets. El Salvador is undergoing a dramatic transformation, and Panama and Paraguay are offering simple residency programs. A Plan B is no longer optional, it's essential. Reserve your free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. And if you want VIP access with special perks, including lifetime replay access and exclusive VIP panels, use promo code JUDGE for 20% off your upgrade. That's expatmoneysummit.com, promo code JUDGE. Ambassador Freeman, welcome here, my dear friend. No matter what we discuss, it's always a pleasure to be able to share your thoughts with my audience. Did the Netanyahu regime know in advance of the Hamas attack on October 7th, 2023?
I don't believe so. I think that the lower levels of Israeli intelligence were well aware of it and tried to warn the Netanyahu administration, but ran into the usual problem that causes intelligence failures, namely not a lack of information or analysis, but disbelief as facts encounter an entrenched political position and assumptions. The one thing you can say about this is that was the beginning of quite a series of collapses of credibility on the part of the Netanyahu government, a series of failures. After all, he had been paying off Hamas as part of a strategy of dividing the Palestinians, doing that in collaboration with the state of Qatar. And it all came home to roost 2 years ago today.
Was he still paying Hamas at the time of the attack, or had the Israelis stopped paying Hamas once they realized it wasn't going to do their bidding?
I really don't know, but I don't see there's been any evidence of an end to that plan. The Israelis were very complacent. They had created the world's largest open-air concentration camp, and they had locked the Palestinians in there. Periodically, to use their grotesque language, they would go in and, quote, mow the grass, unquote, meaning murder a lot of people to intimidate the others, demonstrating that they are a terrorist state, a state that rules by terror. And they thought it was working. And on October 7th, 2 years ago, the Palestinians erupted from the concentration camp in what was an initially quite brilliantly planned military campaign. They were joined, of course, by many others who were not in on the operation, civilians, some of whom were just looking for a chance to see outside the walls of the camp they'd been imprisoned in, others looking for looting, others looking to provide retribution to the Israelis who had been doing terrible things to them for the previous almost 2 decades. So that was an event that represented the total collapse of the Israeli policy on Gaza and Palestine. And it put the Palestinian self-determination issue back on the global agenda, which was Hamas's objective. So they may have militarily been clobbered, they may have been subjected to genocide, but their their diplomatic or political agenda has succeeded.
Was there a stand down order, as many in the West believe? That is, did the Netanyahu government tell the IDF not to shoot back?
No, I don't think that was the case. The fact is that part of the IDF had been redeployed to the West Bank. There were efforts being made even then to do what is happening now, which is to intensify the pressure on Palestinian inhabitants of the West Bank in order to engage in ethnic cleansing, establish more settlements, and so forth. So that the force that was on the border was relatively minor. Here's an important point. Hamas attacked the military installations. A lot of the damage to civilians occurred at the hands of other undisciplined groups, or in fact, probably about half of the civilian deaths at least were caused by the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, under the so-called Hannibal Directive, by which Israel considers that it should kill rather than permit Israeli citizens to be taken hostage.
Is there any question in your mind but that the Israeli forces murdered their own civilians pursuant to this crazy directive rather than allow them to be taken as hostages?
No, there's no doubt whatsoever. There's ample visual evidence, people who looked at the situation. Of course, it's all complicated by the Israeli Hasbara exculpation exercise, which invented all sorts of atrocities which there's no evidence occurred. Mass rapes, the murder of babies. We've heard it all in the form of repeated lies from Prime Minister Netanyahu and others who have been revealed to be fraudulent in their claims. From the point of view of Prime Minister Netanyahu, this was initially a grave blow to his political prestige. He very adroitly tried to turn it into a rallying cry for his continued survival in office. And to do that, he participated in the invention of all kinds of imaginary horrors. Not to say that for those Israelis living or engaged in a musical festival on the border of the concentration camp, this wasn't seriously traumatic. It was. And ironically, Hamas took, about 250 hostages over the border. Some of them were killed en route over the border by the Israelis. Some of them made it over the border and into the tunnels. And of course, the only significant recovery of those hostages has occurred through negotiations between Hamas and Israel, brokered by the United States and others, Qatar. And Qatar was rewarded for that with an attack on Doha, its capital, an abuse of its sovereignty, and the murder of, among others, of one of its security officials.
Was this war an excuse for Netanyahu, to stay in office, enjoying some sort of limited immunity from the 3 prosecutions against him, and B, an excuse to please his right-wing collaborators by expanding the borders of Israel?
Both. Netanyahu's political future has been closely entwined with the Israeli response to October 7th, which I wouldn't call a war. It's an annihilation, an effort at exterminating large numbers of Palestinians. We know that the official figures that both Hamas and Israel tout are gross understatements of the actual number of deaths and wounded. They represent only those individuals who've been positively identified at a hospital or a morgue. Of course, the hospitals and morgues don't exist anymore. And the general estimate by people who've studied the question is that the figure of dead is more like 400,000. That is that Gaza started out with 2.3 million Palestinians. It now has somewhere between 1.5, 1.9, and nobody knows what the number is. Second, of course, this enabled Netanyahu to cement his relationships with the right-wing fanatics, the zealots, who are part of his cabinet, whose names we all now know. But I think there's a third, maybe C, element to this, which is that Netanyahu saw this as an opportunity to advance the long-standing objective of Zionism, which is to make Palestine free of Palestinians. Palestinian Rhein, if you will, in German. So this has been an opportunity for a genocide and an opportunity for ethnic cleansing. And the Israelis have seized upon it with alacrity.
So Netanyahu in 2 years has murdered more people than Harry Truman did in August of 1945 with the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Good point. And done it on a sustained basis.
Yes.
Live streamed to the world.
Yes. Yes. What has this done to Israeli culture, economics, everyday life?
Well, I think it's, I haven't been there recently, but I gather it has completely transformed the country. It is more divided than it ever has been between the ultra-Orthodox who oppose conscription, an army that is fatigued and does not report for duty when reserves are called up, startup businesses that have gone abroad rather than remain in Israel, something like 80,000 small business bankruptcies, the hostage families who understandably are appalled by the lack of any serious effort by their government to recover their loved ones, either dead or alive. And here, of course, we have something very much at play now, which is that instead of confronting the real issue here, which is whether Palestinians are entitled, like Israelis, to self-determination and some sort of polity that is democratically run by themselves, we have a so-called peace proposal, actually a pacification plan, not a peace proposal, which was developed without consultation with any Palestinians, even the captive Palestinians of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas and company, and which has only one merit, and that is that it doesn't seem to directly involve the eviction of all Palestinians from Gaza, as the Israeli government had been planning to do. And I think our president, President Trump, has fallen right into an Israeli trap when he defines the issue as the return of the hostages, not as a resolution of what he calls, erroneously, a 3,000-year-old conflict. There is no 3,000-year-old conflict. There is a conflict of a century, which began with Zionist settlement in Palestine and Zionist efforts from the very beginning to remove the indigenous population.
And the British, typically British, colonization.
Of course. The British, as a colonial power, felt free to determine the futures of those whom they occupied, including the Palestinians. They made a bow to Jewish opinion in Britain, and more particularly in Germany, because this happened as a result of during World War I, when they were trying to separate German Jews from support of the Kaiser. But interestingly, the only Jewish member of the British cabinet at the time, Lord Montagu, opposed Zionism on the grounds that he felt it would lead to the sort of horror that we now see.
Well, I don't see the Palestinians agreeing to this, and I don't know why they would. Why would they even be negotiating with the Israelis? The Israelis tried to murder the very same negotiating team when they were in Doha. Isn't that true?
Yes, that is true. And I think the Palestinians must be very, feel it very difficult to engage in these negotiations. I suspect they're doing so out of a couple of motives. One is desperation. They need to show their own people that they have not forgotten that this is about the survival of the Palestinian nation and its self-determination. They want to retain a bridge to the West, to the United States in particular, because they see that as essential when and if there is a Palestinian state other than a theoretical one, that they will need to have a good relationship with the United States as a great power. And I think they are trying to gratify and retain a connection to President Trump. But the idea that they will disarm, which is why I say this is a pacification plan, and leave, is preposterous. Long ago, Hamas said that they would agree to a Palestinian national unity government in which they would play only a minor role, if any. They would not attempt to control Gaza. So this business that the war or the annihilation is directed at removing Hamas from Gaza is another equivocation or distortion of the facts. So I don't expect they'll agree. I think they have carefully and cleverly agreed to the major element that seems to be of concern to President Trump and the Israeli hostage families, namely the release of the hostages, because for the simple reason that there's no benefit to them from holding the hostages at this point. It doesn't inhibit Israeli attacks on them. And here, let me just end by saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu is engaged at the moment in a humiliating rebuff of President Trump's demand that he halt the bombing in Gaza. It's going on. How does President Trump feel about that? We don't know. I can't imagine he's very happy about having Prime Minister Netanyahu, in effect, give him the finger.
Here's Netanyahu talking about his view of a path to peace. Chris, cut number 3.
If you want a real path to peace, then the Palestinians have to come finally to recognize and accept the existence of a Jewish state in their midst. And that hasn't happened. That's why we don't have peace here, because they refuse to, they don't want a state next to Israel. They want a state instead of Israel. And once any territory they get, they use to attack us again and again. If we don't change that, then then this conflict will continue. If we do, we are able, with the plan that we have for the day after Hamas in Gaza, if we are able to change that, that goes a long way to securing a long-term peace.
He has no plan for the day after Hamas in Gaza other than to eradicate the Gaza and allow Jared Kushner to develop it.
Well, but aside from that, he's absolutely lying when he says the Palestinians have not accepted an Israeli state. That is exactly what the Palestine Liberation Organization did. It is what the Palestinian Authority has done. And even Hamas has said that it would recognize an Israeli state under a hudna, meaning a truce. So he's completely wrong about that. That is the typical Zionist line, paralleling another one which says that there's nobody to talk to because we've killed everyone who could talk to us. The people who tried to negotiate with us, the people we could have legitimized a peace with. Israel has no plan for Gaza other than emptying it of Palestinians and incorporating it into Israel. And by the way, recognizing Israel would require Israel to establish borders. It has no borders.
Right.
It continuously expands.
Right. No question about that. Here he is boasting about his domestic victory in the United States. Now, what do you suppose that is? the acquisition of TikTok by a Zionist billionaire very, very close to Prime Minister Netanyahu, which will allow him and his fanatical colleagues to control the algorithm there. Chris, this is an odd clip here. It almost appears as though he's talking to students. You can't see who he's talking to, but he Socratically asks his audience to respond to him. But here he is, cut number 5.
We're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well, okay? And you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, you know, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are in social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is followers. TikTok. TikTok. Number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. Exactly. Very good.
So he was talking, Chris reminds me, he was talking to American influencers.
Correct.
Who are paid $7,000. These are people none of us, I don't think you or I have heard of them. They're paid $7,000 per post to influence their audience in favor of the Zionist regime. That's the crowd to which he was speaking.
Yes, and I think it's very important that he admits that the whole business of TikTok, which began with spurious charges that somehow it would collect data on Americans that would be useful to the Chinese Communist Party somehow, that he just dispensed with that. I mean, this has never been about that. It's always been about the fact that a great part of our youth get their news and judge what is real and not on the basis of short videos in TikTok. And this has played a major role in educating them to the reality of Israeli behavior, which is totally unacceptable to them and should be unacceptable to everyone. So the idea that if you buy TikTok and you can somehow manipulate the algorithm that is used to censor it, then you can recover the reputation of Zionism, is precisely the proposition that he's stating. I happen to think that that is a false hope, that Israel has done so many things so visibly, so obnoxiously, that it will not recover its reputation. And I fear that the United States, which has chosen to be in lockstep with Israel, moving from the enablement of gradual genocide to active participation in a very intensified campaign of genocide, I don't think we're going to recover our reputation internationally either. And I don't think we should sleep well at night being identified with a country that has become a terrorist state conducting genocide against the indigenes in its territory.
You know what all this means, as I view it? It's time for Netanyahu to attack Iran.
Yes, he undoubtedly is planning that, and we see movement of American air defenses, missile defenses, an aircraft carrier, and other assets, tankers for aerial refueling, and so on, to the region, presumably in support of just such an attack. I hope that the support is limited to the defense of Israel against the inevitable Iranian counterattack. But I can't be sure, based on our participation in the first and third of 3 previous attacks, that we won't be part of it. Hope to God we're not.
Here's Prime Minister Netanyahu talking about the Israeli familiarity with Iranian missiles Well, you'll hear this. Some of it is fanciful. We're cut number 9.
Iran is developing now ballistic missiles that are intercontinental ballistic missiles for 8,000 kilometer range. What does that mean? They add another 3,000 kilometers, and they've got under their atomic guns, New York City in target, Washington, Boston, Miami, Mar-a-Lago. Okay? So that is a very great danger. You don't want to be under the nuclear gun of these people who are not necessarily rational and who chant death to America.
What a fraud.
Well, I would say, first of all, the Iranian development of an ICBM was an inevitability for the same reason that North Korea, under maximum pressure from the United States, also developed an ICBM. The difference is North Korea has a nuclear weapon. Iran does not. And there has never been any reversal of the intelligence community's judgment, both in Israel and the United States and elsewhere in Europe, that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. Now, I think we're pushing Iran very much in that direction. And I think the whole theory that we've applied to the Middle East, to West Asia, in association with Israel, which I would say is an analogy, but the way to get rid of hornets is to poke the hornet's nest. It certainly drives the hornets out. It can be fatal, is an absolutely preposterous approach. The United States has done everything conceivable to provoke Iran into developing a nuclear weapon, in which case it would resemble Israel, which, while assuring us that it was not doing so, clandestinely developed a rather large nuclear arsenal, believed to be about 90 warheads, deliverable from submarines, as well as from the air and on missiles. Yes, Iran is developing an ICBM. I think that is a terrible development, but I also believe that it is a direct result of idiotic American policies that could only have that result. Let's hope they don't develop a nuclear weapon under our pressure.
Ambassador Freeman, a pleasure, my dear friend, no matter what we're talking about. Thank you for your analysis, deeply appreciated. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You as well. And coming up later today at 2 o'clock this afternoon on All of This, Matt Ho, and at 3 o'clock this afternoon on All of This, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.